The night they laughed at me, Vincent Moretti stopped hiding me from the world. I was kneeling in the west garden of Hawthorne Estate with damp soil pressed into the knees of my jeans and a pair of rusted pruning shears trembling in my hand. The party inside the mansion had started an hour ago, and even from 50 yards away, I could hear the soft cruelty of wealth. Crystal glasses chiming, women laughing too perfectly, a string quartet playing something delicate beneath ceilings painted with gold. I was supposed to stay outside. That was the rule. Trim the white roses. Replace the broken stems. Keep my head down until the guests left and the estate returned to silence. I was good at silence. For 6 months, silence had been the safest thing Vincent ever gave me. The rose bush caught my glove and tore through the fabric. A thorn kissed my palm, sharp enough to make me hiss, but not enough to stop. I had learned long ago that small pain was easier to manage than attention. Then the terrace doors opened behind me. Light spilled across the grass like a warning. "There she is," a woman's voice called. The mysterious little gardener. I froze with one white rose in my hand. Madison Vale stepped onto the terrace in a silver dress that looked like moonlight had been trained to obey her. 2 girls followed, both smiling the way people smile when they already know they are safe. Madison's father owned half the shipping terminals on the East Coast. Everyone knew that. Everyone also knew Vincent Moretti was meeting him tonight. Business, they called it. Men like Vincent called many things business. "You," Madison said, pointing one manicured finger at me. "Come here." My stomach tightened. "I'm working, ma'am." The word tasted like ash. Her smile widened. "Exactly. We need fresh flowers for the center table. Unless dirt girls don't take instructions." The girls behind her laughed. I stood slowly, keeping my face still, because faces could betray you faster than words. My boots sank slightly into the wet grass as I gathered the roses against my chest. I told myself to walk in, place the flowers down, and leave. Simple. 30 seconds. Maybe less. But the moment I crossed the marble threshold, the room changed. Conversation thinned. Heads turned. I felt every inch of myself through their eyes. The mud at my cuffs. The tear in my glove. The plain cotton shirt under my faded denim jacket. I smelled roses and rainwater and the expensive perfume of women who had never been asked to disappear. Madison took the flowers from me, looked at them, then let one fall to the floor. Oops. I bent automatically. That was my mistake. Someone near the bar chuckled. Another voice whispered, "Is she staff?" Madison leaned close enough that only I could hear her first words. "Whatever game you're playing here, stop. Men like Vincent don't notice girls who smell like dirt." I looked up at her. "I'm not playing anything." Her eyes dropped to my throat. Before I could stop it, her gaze caught on the thin silver chain tucked beneath my collar. The ring had slipped free. Vincent's ring. My ring. A small circle of platinum I had hidden for 184 days because a secret wife was safer than a visible target. Madison's smile sharpened. "What is that?" My hand flew to my necklace, but she had already seen. She lifted her champagne glass and laughed loud enough for the room to hear. "Oh, this is adorable. The garden girl wears a wedding ring around her neck." Heat climbed my face. "Please don't. Please don't," she repeated, delighted. "Honey, rich men don't marry girls like you. They hire girls like you." Laughter moved through the ballroom, soft at first, then spreading like spilled wine. I reached for the fallen rose, needing something to do with my shaking hands. Madison stepped closer. The champagne tipped. Cold liquid poured over my shoulder and down the front of my shirt. I stopped breathing, not because of the stain, not because of the laughter, because every chandelier above me seemed to blur into one hard white light, and all I could think was that Vincent had promised no one would know. Then the front doors opened. No announcement, no music, just the clean, heavy sound of power entering a room. The laughter died so quickly it felt stolen. Vincent Moretti stood beneath the archway in a black suit, rain shining faintly on his shoulders, his pale blue. Eyes fixed on me. Not Madison, not the guests. Me. He saw the champagne, the mud, the ring in my hand, and the silence that followed was the first time that night anyone truly understood fear. Vincent did not raise his voice. That was the terrifying part. Men like him did not need volume to control a room. He walked across the ballroom slowly, the sound of his shoes against marble impossibly calm, while every guest watched him like prey watches the shadow of a hawk pass overhead. I could still feel champagne dripping down my collarbone. cold against my skin, but the moment his eyes met mine, that embarrassment twisted into something else. Fear. Not fear of him. Fear of what he might do because of me. Madison straightened beside me, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle now. "Vincent," she said lightly, "we were only joking." He did not answer her. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough for me to catch the scent of rain and cedarwood clinging to his coat. His gaze moved over the stain on my shirt, the trembling rose still clutched in my hand, then finally to the silver chain around my neck. The platinum ring rested against my fingers like a secret trying to breathe. Vincent reached up slowly and closed my hand around it. "Who did this?" he asked quietly. My throat tightened. Around us, the ballroom had gone completely silent except for the soft music still drifting from the quartet in the corner. Madison shifted uncomfortably. "It was an accident," I whispered quickly. "I spilled it myself." Vincent looked at me for a long moment, and that was the problem with him. He always looked too carefully, like he could see every lie trying to hide behind your ribs. "Emily." Just my name. Soft. Controlled. Worse than anger. I lowered my eyes first. "Please," I said under my breath. "Do not do this here." His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Then Madison laughed again, desperate this time. "You cannot honestly be serious. She is a gardener." Vincent turned toward her slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "And yet," he said calmly, "you are the one standing in my house insulting my wife." The word hit the ballroom like shattered glass. Wife. Someone near the bar dropped a champagne flute. I heard the sharp crack against marble and several startled gasps ripple through the crowd. Madison blinked twice as if she had misunderstood him. "You're what?" Vincent slipped off his black overcoat and draped it around my shoulders with careful hands. The fabric was still warm from his body. "My wife," he repeated, "which means the next time you humiliate her for entertainment, you humiliate me." Madison's face drained of color. Across the room, her father suddenly looked 20 years older. Men who had been smiling moments ago now stared into their drinks, as if eye contact itself had become dangerous. I wanted the floor to open beneath me. Vincent had promised this life would never touch me publicly. 6 months ago, in a private courthouse 3 states away, he had slid that ring onto my finger and said the marriage was temporary. Protection only. His enemies needed to believe he had no weakness, no attachment, no one to threaten. "Nobody can know about you," he had warned me afterward while snow fell outside the courthouse windows. "Not until I know you are safe." Safe. The word felt almost ridiculous now. Madison folded her arms tightly. "If this is some kind of joke, it is not funny." Vincent finally looked directly at her, and I saw grown men nearby lower their eyes immediately. "Do I look like I am joking?" he asked. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Vincent did something somehow worse than anger. He smiled slightly. "Richard," he called toward the back of the room. One of the men in dark suits near the wall stepped forward instantly. "Cancel the Vale shipping contracts effective tonight." Madison inhaled sharply. Her father stumbled forward. "Vincent, wait. Surely we can discuss this privately." "You already discussed my wife publicly," Vincent replied. "I am simply returning the courtesy." My pulse hammered painfully in my throat. This was spiraling too fast. Too publicly. Exactly what we had spent months avoiding. I touched Vincent's sleeve carefully. "Please," I whispered. "I do not want this." His eyes dropped to my hand gripping his arm. For 1 second, something softer flickered there beneath. All the cold control. Exhaustion maybe. Or regret. "Emily," he said quietly enough that only I could hear. "You spent 6 months pretending you were invisible because of me." His fingers brushed the wet champagne stain near my shoulder, impossibly gentle. "I am done letting people treat you like you are less than human." The ballroom remained frozen around us. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Rain tapped softly against the massive windows overlooking the estate gardens where I had hidden myself for months. Vincent looked at the room one final time, his expression unreadable again. "Listen carefully," he said. "No one in this house will ever disrespect her again." Then his hand found mine in front of everyone, and for the first time since I met Vincent Moretti, he stopped hiding that I belonged beside him. The party ended 30 minutes later, but the tension stayed in the walls long after the last limousine disappeared down the circular driveway. I stood alone in the grand kitchen of Hawthorne Estate wearing Vincent's coat over my ruined shirt while the staff cleaned crystal glasses in careful silence around me. Nobody looked directly at me anymore. 6 hours ago, they had barely noticed I existed. Now they moved around me cautiously, like one wrong word might cost them their careers. I hated it. The kitchen smelled like coffee and lemon polish and expensive food nobody had really eaten. My hand still would not stop shaking. I gripped the edge of the marble counter harder until my knuckles turned pale. You should sit down. Vincent's voice came from the doorway behind me. Low, calm, dangerous only because it belonged to him. I closed my eyes briefly before turning around. He had removed his suit jacket and rolled his sleeves to his forearms. The sharp lines of his white shirt softened slightly by exhaustion. But his eyes were still alert. Vincent never really relaxed. Even at 2 in the morning, he looked like a man waiting for the world to betray him. You embarrassed Madison in front of half of Manhattan, I said quietly. No, he corrected. She embarrassed herself. He crossed the kitchen slowly while the staff suddenly discovered urgent reasons to leave the room. Within seconds, we were alone except for the distant sound of rain tapping against the mansion windows. Vincent stopped across from me. Did she hurt you? I almost laughed at the question. Not because it was funny, because nobody had asked me that in years. Most people only cared whether I could keep working, keep smiling, keep making things beautiful for them. It was champagne, Vincent. That is not what I asked. I looked down at the floor. Marble reflected the chandelier light in soft gold patterns beneath our feet. No, I admitted finally. She did not hurt me. He nodded once, but the tension in his shoulders did not disappear. Good. Silence settled between us. Heavy, familiar, dangerous in a different way. I pulled his coat tighter around myself. You were not supposed to tell them. The words came out smaller than I intended. Vincent's gaze lifted to my face slowly. I know. Then why did you? For a moment, he did not answer. His eyes drifted toward the rain-dark windows overlooking the gardens where I had spent most of the last 6 months hiding from his world, hiding from his enemies, hiding from becoming exactly what I had become tonight. Visible. Because I watched them laugh at you, he said finally. And I realized I hated it more than I feared the consequences. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Vincent Moretti rarely spoke emotionally. He dealt in control, precision, silence. Even kindness from him usually arrived disguised as practicality. New security cameras after I mentioned hearing footsteps outside my cottage. Fresh winter gloves left by the garden shed after the temperature dropped below freezing. He never said I care about you. He simply noticed things and fixed them. You promised this marriage would stay temporary, I whispered. His expression changed almost invisibly at that word. Temporary. 6 months ago, I had agreed to marry him because a man named Adrian Keller had become obsessed with me after I testified against his company in a fraud investigation. Adrian had money, connections, and an alarming inability to accept rejection. Vincent had stepped in quietly after Adrian started following me home from work. Marry me for 1 year, Vincent had said across a dark restaurant table. Keller will never touch you again because nobody touches what belongs to me. At the time, it had sounded insane. Terrifying, but also strangely safe. Vincent leaned one hand against the counter beside me now, close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from him, but not touching, never pushing. Do you want it to stay temporary? He asked softly. My heartbeat stumbled painfully. Outside, thunder rolled low across the estate grounds. I stared at the silver wedding ring still hanging from my necklace. I had worn it hidden against my skin every day because wearing it openly felt too dangerous, too intimate. I do not know, I admitted honestly. Vincent watched me carefully, and something in his face softened in a way almost nobody ever saw. Then footsteps interrupted us. Richard appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Sorry to interrupt, he said carefully, though he clearly was not sorry at all. There is a situation at the front gate. Vincent straightened instantly. Every trace of softness disappeared behind cold control so fast it almost hurt to watch. What kind of situation? Richard hesitated. Madisonville refused to leave. My stomach dropped. Vincent's jaw tightened once. Why? Richard glanced briefly toward me before answering. Because she claims Emily stole something from her tonight. Silence crashed into the kitchen like ice water. Vincent turned toward me slowly. Did you? I stared at him in disbelief. No, he held my gaze for one long second, then nodded immediately. Good, he said calmly. Then this ends now. And something in the way he said it made me realize Madisonville had made a very serious mistake. Rain hammered against the front windows of Hawthorne Estate as Vincent and I crossed the main hallway together. The mansion felt colder now, quieter, like the walls themselves understood something ugly was waiting at the front gate. I still wore his coat wrapped tightly around my shoulders, the sleeves hanging past my fingertips while my wet shoes clicked softly against black marble. Vincent walked half a step ahead of me, one hand in his pocket, the other flexing once at his side like he was controlling the urge to break something expensive. "You do not have to come," he said without looking at me. "Yes, I do." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "If she is accusing me of stealing, hiding upstairs will only make me look guilty." Vincent glanced at me then, pale blue eyes unreadable beneath the dim chandelier light. "You care too much about what these people think. And you care too little." Something almost like amusement flickered briefly across his face. Then it vanished. Richard opened the front doors before we reached them. Cold night air swept inside, carrying the smell of rain and wet pavement. Madison Vale stood beneath the stone archway in a white fur coat with her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her mascara had started to smudge slightly at the corners from the weather, but she still held herself like a woman used to being obeyed. Behind her, her father looked exhausted. Two black SUVs idled near the fountain while Vincent's security team stood silently nearby. Madison's eyes landed on me immediately. Sharp, triumphant. "There she is." Vincent stepped slightly in front of me before speaking. "You have exactly 60 seconds to explain why you are still on my property." Madison ignored him. My diamond bracelet disappeared after she entered the ballroom. Her finger pointed directly at me. Nobody else got near our table. I stared at her in disbelief. "I never touched your bracelet." "Of course you would say that." "Madison." Her father's warning came quietly, but she ignored him again. Vincent remained completely still beside me, which somehow felt more dangerous than anger. Rainwater dripped slowly from the stone roof above us, each drop loud in the silence. "Search me then," I said suddenly. Everyone looked at me. "Emily," Vincent said sharply. "No, I did not steal anything." My heartbeat pounded hard enough to hurt now, but I lifted my chin anyway. If she wants to accuse me publicly, then let her be publicly wrong. Madison smiled slowly like she thought she had already won. "Fine." Vincent turned toward her with terrifying calm. "You do not give orders here." The smile disappeared instantly. He looked toward one of the female security staff near the entrance. Olivia, a tall woman in black, stepped forward immediately. "Escort my wife upstairs privately and verify she has nothing belonging to Miss Vale." Madison folded her arms tighter. "Convenient." Vincent's gaze shifted back to her. "Be careful, Madison." The warning in his voice wrapped cold around the entire driveway. I followed Olivia upstairs in silence while my stomach twisted itself into knots. The mansion felt enormous at night. Too quiet. Too rich. Every polished surface reflected a woman I barely recognized anymore. 6 months ago, I had lived in a tiny apartment over a flower shop in Brooklyn. I worried about rent, groceries, whether my old Honda would survive another winter. Now armed security escorted me through marble hallways because a billionaire's daughter accused me of theft. Olivia checked my pockets gently, professionally, then stepped back. Nothing. Relief hit me so fast my knees weakened slightly. Downstairs again, Madison stood exactly where we left her. Vincent looked at Olivia once. She nodded. Clear. Madison's confidence cracked for the first time. Then someone else took it. Vincent tilted his head slightly. Interesting. His voice remained perfectly calm. "Because my security cameras show you removing your bracelet in the powder room 42 minutes ago." Madison went pale. Her father closed his eyes briefly, like a man finally understanding how expensive his daughter's pride was about to become. Vincent took one slow step forward. "You accused my wife of theft because you were embarrassed." Madison swallowed hard. "I did not mean—" "No," Vincent interrupted softly. "You meant exactly what you did." Nobody moved. Rain continued falling steadily beyond the gates. Somewhere behind me, thunder rolled low across the dark gardens. Madison finally looked at me directly, but there was no superiority left in her face now. Only panic. Vincent turned toward Richard without taking his eyes off her. "The Vale contracts are permanently terminated." "Vincent, please," Madison's father said quietly. "She made a mistake." Vincent nodded once. "And now?" "She learns from it." Then his hand found mine again. Warm. Certain. protective in a way that still startled me every time. "Apologize to my wife," he said calmly. Madison looked like the words physically hurt her. Her eyes flicked around the driveway searching for rescue, but nobody stepped forward. Not one person. Finally, through clenched teeth, she whispered, "I am sorry." Vincent looked down at me instead of her. "Emily." I hesitated. Every instinct told me to let her suffer, to let someone else feel small for once. But that was the difference between Vincent and me. He ended people's problems. I planted flowers over dead soil and prayed things still grew. "I accept your apology," I said softly. Vincent studied my face for one long second, and something unreadable moved through his expression. Respect, maybe, or something even more dangerous. Affection. The Vale family left 10 minutes later, but the storm they brought with them stayed behind. I stood beneath the stone archway watching the black SUVs disappear through the iron gates while cold rain drifted sideways across the driveway. Vincent had not released my hand once. Not during the apology. Not during the silence afterward. Not even now. The warmth of his fingers around mine felt strangely dangerous because I was beginning to depend on it. "You should sleep," he said quietly beside me. "It is almost 3 in the morning." I looked up at him. Rain caught in the dark strands of his hair, softening the sharpness of his face just enough to make him look human instead of untouchable. "I do not think I can." Vincent studied me for a moment before glancing toward the gardens stretching behind the estate. "Walk with me then." We crossed the back terrace together in silence. The rain had eased into a fine mist that clung to the roses and ivy like silver dust beneath the estate lights. Hawthorne Estate looked different at night. Less like a mansion, more like a lonely cathedral built by a man who trusted walls more than people. My boots sank slightly into the wet gravel paths as we moved deeper into the gardens. Every flower bed here existed because I planted it. Every climbing rose, every hydrangea, every white camellia near the fountain. 6 months of hiding inside beauty because beauty asked nothing from me except patience. Vincent stopped near the greenhouse at the far edge of the property. Warm light glowed faintly through the fogged glass windows. "Come inside." The greenhouse smelled like jasmine, damp soil, and cedar shelves warmed by hidden heaters. Rain tapped softly overhead while tiny water droplets slid down the glass ceiling in crooked silver lines. I breathed easier here. Vincent noticed immediately. He always noticed. "You disappear when you are in this room," he said quietly. I brushed my fingers along a row of potted lavender. "Plants are simpler than people." "No," he said. "Plants just tell the truth faster." I glanced back at him with the faintest smile. Was that supposed to sound philosophical? No. Unfortunately, it happened naturally. A soft laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Vincent's expression changed instantly at the sound. Not surprise exactly. More like hunger for something rare. I realized with sudden clarity that he had not heard much laughter inside this estate for a very long time. The thought hurt more than it should have. Vincent moved toward the far work table near the windows. A black velvet box rested there beside a stack of garden plants. My stomach tightened immediately. "What is that?" "Something I should have given you months ago." I did not move closer. "Vincent, open it, Emily." Slowly, I lifted the lid. Inside rested a wedding ring. Not the simple platinum band hanging around my neck. This one was delicate and elegant, framed with tiny diamonds that caught the greenhouse lights like drops of frozen rain. I stared at it speechlessly. "I cannot wear that." Vincent leaned one hand against the table. "Why not?" I laughed softly in disbelief. "Because I spend my days covered in dirt." "You say that like dirt lowers your value." His voice remained calm, but I heard the edge beneath it now. "Emily, do you know what I saw tonight?" I looked down at the ring again. "A disaster?" "No," he stepped closer slowly. "I saw a room full of people trying to make you feel small because they sensed something good in you they did not possess themselves." My chest tightened painfully. Nobody had ever defended me the way Vincent did. Not loudly, not dramatically, just absolutely. "You barely know me," I whispered. Vincent's eyes held mine steadily. "That is not true." Silence settled around us, warm and dangerous. Rain continued sliding down the greenhouse roof, while somewhere outside thunder rolled softly across the estate grounds. Vincent reached toward my necklace carefully. "May I?" My breath caught. I nodded once. His fingers brushed my skin as he lifted the silver chain gently from beneath my shirt. The plain platinum band rested in his palm between us. 6 months, he said quietly. And you still wear it hidden like something shameful. It is not shameful. Then why hide it? Because loving you feels dangerous, I almost said. Because every time you look at me like this, I forget our marriage began as a contract. Because somewhere between winter mornings in the garden and late-night coffee in your kitchen, you stopped feeling temporary. But I could not say any of that aloud. Vincent watched my silence carefully. Then he removed the ring from the chain himself. Look at me, Emily. I did. His pale blue eyes softened in a way that always unsettled me because almost nobody else ever saw it. You never needed to earn your place beside me, he said quietly. Not tonight. Not ever. Before I could answer, headlights swept suddenly across the greenhouse windows. Bright. Fast. Wrong. Vincent's entire expression changed instantly. Softness vanished. Control returned like a blade sliding back into place. Richard's voice crackled through Vincent's phone a second later. Boss, he said sharply. We have a problem. Vincent answered without taking his eyes off me. What happened? A pause. Then Richard spoke carefully. Adrian Keller is at the front gate asking for Emily. The moment Adrian Keller's name left Richard's mouth, the air inside the greenhouse changed. Vincent went completely still beside me, and that terrified me more than shouting ever could. Rain continued tapping softly against the glass ceiling while my heartbeat turned uneven inside my chest. Adrian was supposed to be gone. That had been the entire point of the marriage. Vincent lowered the phone slowly. How did he find this place? Richard's voice crackled through the speaker. We are checking now. Vincent's jaw tightened once. Do not let him through the gates. Already handled. A pause. But he says Emily invited him. I froze. What? Vincent turned toward me immediately. His pale blue eyes searched my face carefully, reading panic faster than words. I did not, I said quickly. I swear I did not. I know. He answered instantly. No hesitation. No suspicion. Just certainty. Somehow that made my throat tighten even more. Vincent slid the phone back into his pocket and moved toward the greenhouse door. Stay here. Fear spiked sharply through me. No, he stopped. I stepped closer before I could lose my nerve. I spent months hiding from Adrian because nobody believed how obsessive he had become. If he is really here, I am not sitting in a greenhouse pretending this does not involve me. Vincent watched me silently. The estate lights outside cast pale gold across his face while rain blurred the gardens beyond him into shadows and silver. Emily, he said quietly, you do not understand men like Adrian Keller. I almost laughed at that. I understand him better than anyone. The memory hit me suddenly. Adrian standing outside my apartment building at midnight, holding flowers after I told him never to contact me again. Adrian smiling too calmly while saying, you belong somewhere better than Brooklyn. Adrian showing up at my job 3 days later because he happened to be nearby. People called it persistence when wealthy men refused to hear the word no. They only called it frightening when poorer men did the same thing. Vincent must have seen something shift in my expression because his voice softened slightly. Tell me what you were thinking. I looked down at my hands. Dirt still lingered faintly beneath my fingernails despite washing them twice tonight. I am thinking this is my fault. No, the word came immediately. Sharp enough to cut through the room. He chose his behavior. That responsibility belongs to him. I swallowed hard. You did not see how he looked at me. Before. Vincent stepped closer slowly. And you think I do not understand dangerous obsession? Silence settled heavily between us. Because he did understand. Maybe better than anyone. The difference was that Vincent protected things he loved. Adrian tried to possess them. Another set of headlights swept briefly across the greenhouse windows outside. Vincent's expression hardened instantly again. Stay behind me when we reach the house. Vincent, Emily. His voice lowered dangerously. Tonight already proved what happens when people think you are vulnerable. I will not allow another man to test that theory. My pulse stumbled painfully. Before I could answer, he opened the greenhouse door and cold night air rushed inside around us. We crossed the wet garden paths quickly while security moved visibly across the estate now. Men in dark coats near the gates. Earpieces flashing under dim lights. The mansion no longer looked elegant tonight. It looked fortified. Vincent kept one hand lightly against my back the entire walk, guiding without forcing. Protective. Constant. We entered through the side terrace doors just as Richard approached from the main hallway. He refuses to leave, Richard said quietly. Claims he only wants 5 minutes with Emily. Vincent's expression remained unreadable. And if he does not get them? Richard hesitated briefly. He implied he might speak to the press about the marriage. My stomach dropped. Vincent did not react outwardly, but I felt the tension ripple through him instantly. The secret mattered less now after tonight, but public attention still created risk. Especially for him. Especially for me. I can talk to him, I said softly. Both men looked at me immediately. Vincent's answer came first. No, he will not stop otherwise. Emily, please. My voice cracked slightly. I am tired of running from him. Vincent stared at me for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He reached up and tucked a damp strand of hair behind my ear carefully, his fingers brushing my skin with heartbreaking gentleness. You should never have had to run in the first place. The softness in his voice almost undid me completely. Richard looked away discreetly, like he suddenly found the hallway architecture fascinating. Vincent exhaled slowly. 5 minutes, he said finally. In the front salon. Security present. Door open. Relief mixed with terror inside me. Okay. But Vincent caught my wrist lightly before I could move. One more thing. I looked up at him. His pale blue eyes held mine steadily beneath the chandelier light. The moment you feel uncomfortable, he said quietly, you walk away. You do not owe anyone access to you simply because they demand it. Emotion rose sharply into my throat. Nobody had ever said something like that to me before. Not as a rule. Not as permission. Vincent released my wrist slowly. Then his expression cooled back into perfect control before he opened the salon doors. Adrian Keller stood near the fireplace in an expensive gray coat, with rainwater still clinging to his dark hair. The moment he saw me, he smiled. And every instinct inside me screamed that coming here tonight had been a mistake. Adrian Keller looked exactly the same as the last time I saw him outside my apartment in Brooklyn. Perfect hair. Expensive coat. Calm smile stretched too carefully across a face that never seemed to hear the word no. The kind of man people trusted instantly because he knew how to perform kindness better than most people practiced honesty. But I remembered the version beneath that performance. The late-night calls from blocked numbers. The flowers left outside my door after I asked him to stop contacting me. The way his voice sharpened whenever another man spoke to me for too long. Emily, he said softly, stepping forward. You look beautiful. Vincent moved before I could answer. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. He simply stepped into the space between us until Adrian's attention shifted away from me entirely. You have 5 minutes, Vincent said calmly. Adrian's smile faded slightly. I was hoping to speak with her privately. That will not happen. Silence stretched across the room. The front salon suddenly felt too small despite the 20-foot ceilings and marble fireplace glowing softly against the dark walls. Rain tapped steadily against the tall windows while security remained visible near the hallway entrance. Adrian finally looked back at me over Vincent's shoulder. I came because I was worried. I almost laughed. Worried. That word from him felt poisonous now. You followed me here, I said quietly. That is not concern. Adrian spread his hands slightly like I was being unreasonable. Emily, you disappeared without explanation. Then suddenly half of Manhattan hears rumors that you married Vincent Moretti. His eyes flicked toward Vincent briefly before returning to me. You expect me not to ask questions? Vincent's voice remained perfectly even. No. She expects you to respect boundaries. Adrian ignored him completely. You do not belong in this world. Something about the way he said it tightened my chest painfully because 6 months ago, part of me would have believed him. Before Hawthorne Estate. Before Vincent handed me coffee on sleepless mornings and quietly memorized which flowers bloomed best in winter because he knew I loved them. Before someone looked at me like I deserved protection instead of possession. You are right, I said softly. Adrian blinked once, clearly surprised by my agreement. I do not belong in this world. My eyes shifted toward Vincent briefly. But neither does he. Silence fell instantly. Adrian frowned slightly. Vincent remained motionless beside me, though I felt his attention sharpen. What is that supposed to mean? Adrian asked carefully. I looked at Vincent fully now. People think fear is the only thing holding this house together. Vincent's expression became unreadable. Emily. But it is not, I continued quietly. It is loyalty. The staff stays because he protects them. Richard stays because Vincent once paid for his daughter's surgery without telling anyone. Olivia stays because he gave her a job after another company blacklisted her for reporting harassment. Adrian stared at me like he no longer recognized the woman standing in front of him. Maybe he did not. Honestly, neither did I sometimes. You barely know him, Adrian said slowly. No, I answered. I know exactly who he is. Vincent's gaze had not left my face once. The room suddenly felt warmer despite the storm outside. Adrian laughed softly, but there was frustration underneath now. Emily, this is insane. You married a man people fear. People the mansion finally grew quiet around 4 in the morning. The storm outside had softened into steady rain, gentle enough that I could hear water sliding from the gutters beyond the bedroom windows. I stood barefoot beside the fireplace in Vincent's room, wearing one of his dark sweaters with the sleeves pushed past my hands. The scent of cedarwood still clung faintly to the fabric. Everything inside Hawthorne Estate felt different now, less like a hiding place, more like a life I had accidentally stepped into and somehow forgotten to leave. Vincent stood near the window with his tie loosened and one hand braced against the glass, watching the security lights glow across the wet gardens below. He had barely spoken since Adrian left. Not cold, just thoughtful in the dangerous, quiet way Vincent always became when emotions got too close to the surface. I wrapped my arms around myself tighter. You should sleep. He glanced back at me over his shoulder. That sounds suspiciously like an order. It is a suggestion from someone who watched you threaten 3 people before midnight. A faint smile touched his mouth. Only 3. I shook my head softly. That should concern you more than it does. Vincent turned fully toward me then. The firelight softened the sharp angles of his face, catching silver in his watch and shadows beneath his eyes. For the first time since I met him, he looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like holding up entire worlds for too long had finally become heavy. Come here, he said quietly. My heartbeat stumbled. Even after 6 months of marriage, moments like this still startled me because Vincent never demanded closeness. He offered it carefully, like he was afraid I might refuse. I crossed the room slowly until I stood beside him near the window. Rain blurred the gardens into silver and black outside, while warmth from the fireplace curled softly through the bedroom behind us. Vincent looked down at me for a long moment. Are you afraid of me now? The question hit harder than anything Adrian said tonight. Why would you ask that? Because tonight you saw what my world actually looks like. His voice remained calm, but I heard something dangerous beneath it. Not anger, vulnerability. And most people eventually decide they do not want any part of it. I studied his face carefully. This man terrified politicians, business executives, entire criminal organizations. Yet somehow he still looked at me like losing my trust would destroy him more than losing power ever could. Vincent, I said softly, the first time I met you, you offered me protection instead of control. His gaze flickered slightly. That is a very low standard. You would be surprised. Silence settled warmly between us. The fire cracked softly nearby. Somewhere deep in the estate, an old grandfather clock chimed for slow notes. Vincent reached toward my necklace again, fingers brushing the hidden chain beneath the sweater collar. You are still wearing it. I forgot to take it off. Liar. The word came gently this time. I smiled before I could stop myself. Maybe. His eyes softened watching me. Then he did something that made my breath catch completely. He removed the silver chain slowly and placed the plain platinum ring directly into my palm. Emily, he said quietly, if you want out of this marriage after tonight, I will give you an annulment tomorrow morning. I stared at him in shock. What? No lawyers. No arguments. You walk away clean. The room suddenly felt too still. Too important. Vincent held my gaze steadily despite the tension I could see in his shoulders now. I meant what I said earlier, he continued softly. You never owed me your life simply because I protected it. Emotion rose sharply into my throat. Because this was the difference between men like Adrian and men like Vincent. Adrian loved like a clenched fist. Vincent loved like an open door. Terrifying because I could leave. Meaningful because he hoped I would stay anyway. I closed my fingers slowly around the ring. Do you want me to leave? Vincent's expression changed instantly. Raw enough to hurt. No, just one word. Honest enough to steal the air from my lungs. I looked down at the platinum band resting in my hand. 6 months ago, it had felt like survival. A shield. A contract signed by 2 strangers in a cold courthouse. But somewhere between midnight coffee in the kitchen and quiet mornings in the garden, Vincent Moretti had become the safest place I knew. I lifted my eyes back to his. Then stop giving me exits every time things become difficult. He went completely still. Emily, I am tired of temporary things, I whispered. And I think maybe you are too. For one suspended second, neither of us moved. Rain whispered against the windows. Firelight flickered gold across dark wood walls. Vincent looked at me like he was seeing something fragile and impossible at the same time. Then, very carefully, he took the diamond ring from his pocket. The one from the greenhouse. The one I told him I could never wear. Hold out your hand. My pulse thundered painfully. Still, I obeyed. Vincent slid the ring onto my finger with impossible gentleness. Dirt-stained gardener hands. Mafia Boss wedding ring. Somehow both belonged together now. His thumb brushed lightly over my knuckles afterward. You know, he said quietly, those roses outside bloom better when you talk to them. I laughed softly through the tears threatening my eyes. That is scientifically ridiculous. Maybe. His pale blue eyes held mine steadily. But so is a woman changing an entire house simply by existing inside it. Emotion cracked open quietly inside my chest then, because Hawthorne Estate no longer felt cold, and Vincent Moretti no longer felt like the villain people feared in whispered conversations across Manhattan. He felt like home. Outside, dawn began slowly bleeding silver across the rain-soaked gardens while the city beyond the estate kept chasing power and money and control. But inside that room, none of it mattered anymore. Because sometimes the most dangerous men in the world are only dangerous until someone finally teaches them how to be loved.